In this video, I'm going to share with you 4 extremely compelling reasons why you really should consider giving house paints a try in your next painting. I recently reworked this painting using common everyday house paints, and it was such a fabulous experience. It was so much better than anything I would have anticipated. I am just over the moon with this new medium. I did run into a couple of snags. I'll show you how I worked around that. But I think this is one of those videos that you're going to thank me for it later. I hope you'll stay tuned. The first significant benefit of using house paints over regular acrylic paints is it's significantly cheaper. And who doesn't want to save some money when it comes to your art supplies? For our comparison purposes, I'm going to compare my Liquitex heavy body paint, which is what I normally paint with. And for those of you who like a student grade paint, I'm also going to show you the pricing on that. And then I'm going to compare it ounce per ounce to our house paint and let you see the difference. All right, let's start first comparing the Liquitex heavy body. And I do buy that in the larger 4.65 ounce tube. So as of today at Dick Blick, that's $12.35 for that tube, which is $2.65 an ounce. Compare that to the Benjamin Moore sample jar, which works out to 81 cents an ounce. So that's a difference of $1.84 more per ounce. Quite a significant difference. All right, now let's look at the Liquitex Basic Acrylic. This is the student grade paint, and I'm comparing a 4-ounce tube to my Benjamin Moore sample, $1.12 an ounce versus 81 cents an ounce. So it's still 31 cents an ounce more expensive than the house paint. Even if you go way up to the large jars of Liquitex Basics, it's still more expensive than the house paint, although it does get within, say, 7 cents per ounce, much closer, but you have to buy really large amounts for that. One of the most surprising things about this paint, and I don't think I would have even believed it if I hadn't experienced it, it's the coverage. Even though these paints are thin, they will cover over anything with one coat. I even covered over navy blue flowers and a dark green bottle in this last painting, and just one quick brush stroke and boom, it was done. That's why I usually use the heavy body paints, just so I can get better coverage, but gosh, this was just amazing. I typically use a palette knife to mix colors together so I don't get my brushes so loaded with paint. But using these house paints, there was such a huge difference. Again, because these paints are so thin, you can barely push a color with your brush into another color and instantly you have something beautiful. When putting in the background of this large painting, I intentionally didn't overstir or overmix the paints, which resulted in these beautiful passages of color. You can achieve some beautiful marbling and interesting color notes using these house paints. So let me show you how easy this is. So I'm taking some turquoise, some green. I've got a lot of paint on my brush, and I'm just doing a swipe. Mix a little white in there. Beautiful coverage. If you like a real kind of loose, impressionistic look and you want to have some beautiful brush work, this is the ticket. I just absolutely love this. And look at the coverage that you're getting. So this is how I did the large painting, but I didn't jump around quite as much as with color. I'd do a section in one color and then I'd maybe lighten it a little bit more in the next section, and then I might introduce a yellow or something. But yeah, I just absolutely love this. And it's just a looser, a little bit more contemporary. You can keep these heavy brush strokes or you can kind of paint them out a little bit if that bothers you, but I think they're beautiful. Very expressive brush work. So that is what you can do with house paint. The fourth reason I'm loving house paints is because I really like painting large. I like using large canvases and I like using large brushes. Not only are the paints expensive when trying to cover a large canvas, but when you're painting with acrylics, it's very difficult to get the background in. I am on such a personal quest to paint more impressionistically, and using extra large brushes have proven to be a real key for me. But it's almost impossible for me to use the size brush that I want to use with that stiffer type of acrylic paint that I've been using. But with house paints, not only is it easy, but it's really producing beautiful results. I just love these paints with my big brushes. Okay, full transparency, as much as I love these new paint, there were a few areas that were a bit frustrating. Let me show you those. The first is because these paints are so thin, you have to have some way of keeping them from just running everywhere. So I took my Masterson Stay Wet palette that I use for my regular acrylic paints. I did not put a sponge in it. I got out this palette of Gray Matters uh, paper, which is a very slick gray paper, which is great. And it's just a little too big for the box. So rather than cutting it, I laid it on top of the box and you could kind of see through it a little bit enough to know where the edges are. And I just pressed in. I got that paper to conform to the shape of the box, and then I folded down the edges. And then I went back with a real sharp fold, and it made a perfect little carrying case for these paints. That was a pretty easy solution. By far the most aggravating issue with these paints was getting the paint onto the palette without making a mess. The artist who uses these house paints that started this whole idea uses her palette knife to dip into the jar and put it onto the palette. But I found that to be pretty drippy, and there's so much cleanup that you have to do for the jar itself so that you can get the lid off the next day. And then there's also the palette knife that has to be cleaned thoroughly before you can dip it into another paint. And it just went through a lot of paper towels. My gloves got really messy very early on. So my first solution to this was an improvement, and that was to transfer paint into these smaller jars. I could actually dip my brush directly into the jar or just pour a pile onto the palette. But I knew if I was going to be using a lot of this paint on larger canvases, there had to be a better way, and there is. I ordered these plastic squeeze bottles from Amazon, and they are absolutely perfect. The only issue was they came with only one funnel, and I didn't want to have to stop and clean that funnel each time. I had ordered a bag of cheap funnels, but they were way too small. So I'm going to run to the dollar store and get what I need. But I think I'm going to love these squeeze bottles. They should keep the paints fresh for a really long time. There's no mess, no fuss. It's easy to see what's in the bottle. I think it's just a great solution. So the other issue that I had with these paints is I was using Benjamin Moore because there's an Ace Hardware store right around the corner from me, and that was the most convenient. And I had a fairly new fan deck. So I went through this fan deck and just picked the colors that I wanted. You can also order these online, but it made me a little nervous buying off the monitor. Many of the colors I bought, I'm absolutely in love with, and I will put a link in the description box to some of these that were just fabulous. This dark periwinkle is just my favorite. This green, the pinky red, the blue. Some of these were absolutely gorgeous. The one that I really disliked a lot was this dark blue that I was expecting to be like my ultramarine. And it wasn't. And I think the problem is, in order for them to get colors this dark, they're having to put a lot of black in it. So this blue looked like a blue charcoal color. It just was a dead looking color. So I ended up, of course, wanting to use the thin paints, the whites, to mix with it. I couldn't use my heavy body. But I did find this Newton Galleria, which is a much thinner paint, and I was able to use it. There were some places in the painting where I wanted, for example, sap green. I didn't have anything comparable to that. So I did use a little sap green on the leaves, and I just wasn't mixing it with any of the other house paint colors. But so that would be my only warning. I think next time I might even do a little sample of the paints I really like on a sheet of paper, take that to the paint store, and pick my colors from there. Another thing that worked, this was something someone had given me. It's golden open acrylic in chromium oxide green, which is a beautiful green, but because it's so thin, I was able to use it as well. And again, you can use the house paints on 3/4 of the painting and then switch over to some of your regular heavy body for the details, but I just wouldn't want to try to use that in the background with the thinner paint. So that was a little bit of a frustration, but this is just something I've never tried before, and I'm working through the colors, finding some, which is true of all my paints. I have some that I absolutely love and use all the time, and others that, you know, I've said goodbye to. So I will put a link in the description box, or a list rather, of the ones that I really love. So if you're interested in saving money, in getting great coverage with your paints, and something that's super easy to mix with a looser painting style, and if you like painting on large canvases and using large brushes, these house paints may just be the ticket for you. They don't have to be Benjamin Moore. They could be another brand, but I encourage you to get brave and give them a try. Hey, I'd love for you to stop by my website. I'll put a link in the description box below if you'd like to check out my courses and tutorials where you can find real-time instruction, all very reasonably priced. And of course, it always helps my channel if you'll give me a quick thumbs up. And if you'd like to subscribe, you won't miss the next free video that's coming out soon. I appreciate your time. Thanks for visiting. God bless.